I believe there is an important conversation that we need to at least address whenever it comes to evaluating and analyzing particular problems that exist and that we deal with on an everyday basis. And I would like to start off this kind of brief speech I would like to give to you with an assertion. You will all fail. Now take a deep breath. I don't mean this class. I don't mean life. I don't mean everything that you're about to do. But at some point in life, you're going to fail something that you actively seek out to do. And we have to ask ourselves, why does that happen in those moments that it happens? And so today I would like to posit an argument to you that life, problems, solutions, all do not exist in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is it is a metaphorical expression to say that our perspectives are typically drawn into whatever it is we are researching, whatever it is we are feeling, whatever it is we are analyzing, those anxious anxieties brought to you by 2021 TM or copyright will always kind of take precedence over our ability to have a wider, deeper understanding of whatever problem it is that we are seeing or whatever problem it is that is occurring, that we need to kind of think to ourselves, can I analyze this? Can I make it better? And how can I get a better understanding of it so I can better put myself in a position to succeed, whatever that may be? And we're going to use the word failure, success, because those are kind of the linchpins in which we look to, or at least analyze, kind of in a way or in a manner of evaluation to say that we did good or we did bad. And sure, these are all vague and nebulous words that have their own kind of metaphysical or philosophical debates over what it is to be good at something or what it is to be bad at something, but we're just going to ignore that and just use the most pragmatic kind of thoughts on it as we move forward. And so today is a day in which we are going to look at this idea that when we analyze problems, there is a lot that is going on that is unseen that we need to start at least thinking to ourselves, how do we analyze it, or how do we approach that which we do not necessarily know is going to be very good for us if we ever want to enact some of those kind of like deliberative democratic policies that we have pitched, maybe in this class or maybe outside to another organization or anywhere in life, and start to really hone in on kind of those complex nuances of our existence that is not quite in a vacuum, so that we can at least have a chance to succeed. All right, so I start off with this guy. From those of you that don't know this man, you probably do when I say the name. It's going to be Plato, but next to him is going to be a quote from Socrates. I know I set this up in a very weird and kind of backwards way, but I think it's also very important for us to know. And on this, you see a quote that you have heard a bajillion times before. And if you haven't heard it a bajillion times before, you'll hear it at least once or twice in your life. And that is, the unexamined life is not worth living. And that is not to say that life doesn't have some inherent value, but there is something more to this idea of examination of one's existence, of kind of one's democratic self, of kind of the deliberative world in which we live in, that has some inherent worth to it. This is also something philosophy people will always tell you to make sure that they can justify their own selves in a world in which sometimes they feel left out or forgotten because we kind of lock ourselves into closets and holes in the middle of nowhere. But that is another issue for another day. Why I like to start off with this quote whenever we examine kind of where things come from is, you'll think to yourself, okay, Socrates said that. But how do we know Socrates said that? Well, we know Socrates said that mainly through Plato's work and Plato's Apology. Now, do we know that he actually said these words? No, we have to take for granted, or we have to take in faith, someone else's writing on a subject matter that they are then using to prove a point about their own kind of diatribes on existence, philosophy, truth, love, etc. And if you don't know much about Plato, Plato's just hooked on this idea of truth. He's tripping on it all day, every day, for the most part, and trying to get to this idea that there can be like philosopher kings, that there is some sort of truth to existence in the world that we can then teach other people. And also being a weird, creepy old man that you probably, if you actually met, would just be like, why is this why is this kind of the foundational figure of philosophy in and of itself? He's creeping me out. I hate every second of his existence. But We kind of look at this as kind of an example of how, in context, something that someone says or something that we think historically or categorize to a specific person can directly be associated with another person's kind of understanding or interpretation of the world that we then get read through. Now, does Socrates mean what he means in the way in which Plato is presenting it to us is not something that we can take for granted. We can use the context to kind of put into conversation what is happening at that time period, but we cannot directly know because we are not there, we do not know. And so we'll talk a lot about democracy, for example, and also Plato's a good figure for democracy as he has many figures such as the Philosopher King, i.e., when we make our just city state that we're going to make one day, we should have this kind of Philosopher King just figure making all the deliberations and ruminations over what is right and what is wrong in existence, because the normal people that you deal with on an everyday basis are probably a little bit too dumb to come to the just or morally right decision making. And whether or not you find that persuasive or not, that the mass majority of people in the world are not the smartest or brightest or most communal in the sense that they want to help other people and not just going to do a bunch of greedy things to get their own, might be something that is super compelling to you, or it could be something that you're just like, whatever, I'm not on this Kool-Aid. It's important for us because a lot of the ideas that you have pitched to me and a lot of the ideas that you're going to continue to pitch to other people throughout your life are going to have to deal with this idea of working with others in a democratic, here is my idea, do you want to accept it or do you want to deny it kind of template. And we need to have kind of a foundational approach to saying, okay, the reasons they are accepting this might not just be because of the reasons which I am putting out persuasively to the other persons, or the reason they're denying or rejecting the proposal might not be directly associated with those ideas. That is just a problem that happens whenever we think about democracy. I don't know why the figure of Plato is actually being used in this presentation that I am talking about right now, but he is on my mind for some other reason, and I thought he makes at least a couple compelling points that we should at least start to think about when we think about widening our perspectives when it comes to and kind of interpreting the world and understanding the things around us so that we have a better sense of what is right, what is wrong, what is going up, and what is going down. Okay, so you've heard the song 99 Problems. You have more. When you are deliberately talking about a potential problem in any sort of kind of argument you are making, any kind of speech you are making, any kind of just conversation that you're making, there are an infinite amount of problems that can potentially occur. That is because the idea or the whole modality of kind of there is an infinite chance for different contingencies, different problems, different possibilities to emerge is all going to be something that we have to deal with on an everyday basis. So you wanted to give me a speech on climate change, for instance, and you spend a large chunk of your time talking about how a solution to climate change could potentially make the world better. You give me a huge speech on, say, ocean acidification, diversity of animals or animal loss is probably going to kill us all. New diseases such as COVID-19 are going to continually propagate as new animals come into conversation and contact with one another. You can give me a litany of reasons of why the world is screwed, and then you come to me with a solution that is, Aaron, you should use renewable straws. Well, you are certainly right. I should use renewable straws. I have one in one of my drawers over there that I don't use that I bought, which was really dumb because at the end of the day, I used a lot of packaging and the shipment, which is probably more detrimental to the environment to get the straw that I don't use in the first place, came to me. So yes, I should use more renewable straws. That is a correct assumption because there is a problem with plastics being thrown out into the world, hurting all of the animals in the ocean, causing more biodiversity loss. Yes, these things exist, but not quite directly in the vacuum that we're talking about, or they do not necessarily relate to the problem that you have identified in the first place. So climate change, this growing, super nebulous big thing, might not get resolved by just me or my associates or my peers and my colleagues, just all simply moving over to this concept of kind of renewable straws. Instead, we might need to say, all right, Aaron, I need need you to flex your political clout and political muscles. Really just like go for it, get out there, and start to get people to lower their ecological footprint, but at the same time putting pressure on large corporations, which are the number one producers of that CO2 in the first place, mainly in developing countries and developed countries. This could be way more of a persuasive avenue to get me to fix or remedy the problem that you have isolated in the first place. The reason I am talking about this is because there are things when we talk about possibilities and contingencies within our problems that allow us to address it through an idea of risk assessment, to be able to look at kind of that overarching problem and say, what is the risk of this action? And that is just kind of using your experiential knowledge and things you've garnered over time to say that me taking this action has this amount of probability of fixing the problem which I have isolated at large. And so doing that will allow you to at least put into conversation your problem with whatever solution it is you are attempting to craft, because just analyzing that a problem exists is purely an informative act. It is something that academics really love to do and super pees me off, that never really focuses on the solution dynamic to creating a way in which we can move forward past the processes and not be paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of all of the potentials of possibilities that go into any individual problem. And this is truncated by everything we do in life. So for instance, you as an individual have problems. COVID is probably a big problem that you have in your life right now. You might have a relationship problem in your life right now. It is something that is very hard for you to just like kind of really see, and it is taking up a lot of time. It's taking up a lot of energy, and you have to start addressing these problems that which occur in terms of solutions. Do we need to remove the problem? Typically, we want to remove the problem. Sometimes we don't remove the problem because we do cost benefit analysis, and removing the problem is actually going to be harder than the solution itself. However, most of the time we do want to get rid of the problem. So we start to address it through coming up with solutions that are pragmatic and practical in an everyday sense. I have seen Aaron, you should drink renewable straws or reusable metal straws speech to combat climate change speech a million times. But if you thought about that in the same terms in which you were thought to yourself, okay, I'm in an abusive, toxic relationship. How do I fix it? Maybe I should use renewable straws. No, that doesn't really fix the problem. Or maybe I don't text back one day. That doesn't really fix the problem. We have to address the solution with whatever has the highest potential risk to ensure the success in what you are doing. Now, a lot of this is going to be trapped within our perspective. And our perspective is that subjective thing that really brings us in to whatever it is we are doing, whatever it is we are analyzing, and whatever it is we are thinking about. So whenever you think to yourself, I have a problem I am researching, sometimes we really get drawn into that thing we are researching and lose the kind of sight or the scope that everything we do, everything we talk about, everything we mention kind of exists in that overarching vacuum that I was referring to a little bit earlier. And so when we say, all right, I'm going to give this speech on climate change, and I'm really into this concept of renewable straws, you really kind of like draw yourself into this idea of the renewable straw. You stop thinking to yourself, okay, how does this solve CO2 emissions in developing countries? Or how does this lower coal emissions in most of the developed world? Are things you stop asking yourself whenever you kind of get pulled in through your own subjective interpretation or perspective on the world. That is why whenever I was speaking about citations, or at least reading and doing research, I always ask individuals to try to get as many different kind of citations as you can get on a singular subject at hand. Why is that? Because everybody's individual experience is going to teach them new ways in which they can approach it, which will all kind of have implicit truths that they are willing to see of the overarching problem that will illuminate way more of kind of all of the contingencies, all of the problems, all of the aspects that we cannot directly see because we are tied to our own subjective interpretation. We're tied to our own knowledge. We're tied to our own kind of understanding of an event. When we have other perspectives, we get that kind of, we untie ourselves a little bit back. That's why we use therapists whenever we have relationship problems. That's why we use mechanics whenever we have car problems. Sure, I can Google what is wrong with or whatever that weird sound is that is coming from my car, but I'm going to take it to somebody else, regardless of the hit that it takes on my knowingness of the world, because I am not going to fix the car. I'm going to make it infinitely worse if I do not take somebody else's perspective of the time in which I am going to fix it. That is why we like to talk to as many people as possible whenever we're going to address problems. And so while we do have problems, another thing that I want to say with an issue of perspective is that this drawn in ness of the perspective of whatever it is we are analyzing, working with, or trying to evaluate to make a better world or a better place, or maybe a worse world, or maybe our own kind of personal gain, whatever the problem and solution dichotomy is. We tend to think in terms of absolutes and extremes. You can circle back to the Kenneth Burke Rotten with Perfection thing that I lectured on way back when, but it is one of those things where language likes to make things a little bit more hyperbolic in our interpretation of them. We are never as good as we are when we are at our best. We are never as bad as we are when we are at our worst. So when we take a look at our problem, it's going to be easy to get into that logical fallacy where we use the slippery slope to say, hey, the problem's going to be magnified and the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. You failing a speech, or you failing a test, or you failing something, or even a semester of college is not going to be the end of the world. It's going to feel like it at the time because you're in that perspective, but being able to remove yourself from that area in which you are currently stationed, or at least situated in, is really helpful for us to allow ourselves to think, okay, now we have a wide lens, wide scope, and a better understanding of what is actually or naturally occurring when we are talking to it. And so here, because I've been talking so much about students failing, I'm actually going to do something more positive to give you a little potential reprieve, and also for you to get another example for how potential in all of these contingencies and all of the things that we have unseen work. A good thing to think about is the concept of contingency plans as well, but we'll talk about that, or at least hold off on that for a second. This is why I hate PowerPoints, and I can't wait to be in a actual classroom or with people again, so I can stop using PowerPoints as much, because it overtly structures the way in which you talk and really has a lot of ties and slows down kind of those trains of thoughts and derails conversations from something that is natural and organic into something that is a little bit more too formalized in the sense that it is just robotic. But anyway, so here is a perspective that I have. Students that, generally speaking, turn in all of the work should receive an A. And in my classroom space, students that have turned in all of the work, 93% of them have received an A in this course. That is probably an unpopular opinion, or at least an unpopular sentiment in kind of my academic circle. Or if I told all of my peers that, they would all stare at me just like, you are way too nice, or you are way too soft, or whatever sort of non-hard ass term they want to throw out there. But I will give you my perspective of it. And so this is my worldview and argument. And I'll read this just because I like to be a little bit more precise whenever I speak directly to my arguments. Humanities courses should remove the incentive structure via grading and focus purely on the capacity to train individual propensity for critical thought and engagement. Grades directly remove that desire to learn and instead use an outdated model of regurgitated information or information reception that stymies both retention of information and the desire for critical and intellectual thought. That is just something I think is true. That is my perspective on grades and kind of the understanding of whether something should be turned in directly and lead to an A, or turned in not directly and lead to a B. I don't give two fucks about it. And I apologize for the hard language right there. But the reason I don't is because the way in which it is structured is one that says you just need to memorize some information, whether or not you can use it, whether or not it's applicable, whether or not it is associative with some way in which you can envision the world to be a better, complex, or even more stupid place is irrelevant to the fact that you can just regurgitate and do that direct thing that you were told to do or repeat at that time period, which historically speaking is why colleges are moving away from the SATs. That's why they're moving away from the GREs. That's why they're moving away from these standardized tests. Not to mention the standardized tests are kind of a corporate Ponzi scheme in which you're giving them a shit ton of money for them to just give you grades which are totally kind of bankrupt anyway. But anyway, what we can see there, well, they don't measure your intellectual capacity, but that is beyond me. I didn't say that out loud. Well, I just did say that out loud. I don't really care. What we can see there is that I have a view. I have a solution, and that is I tend to try to remove the kind of core concept of a grade and really focus in on how to make students better people. That is the only thing I really care about, is just how do I make them better people in the scope and context of the class that I am working in. And the scope and the context of the class I'm currently working in is public speaking. So how do I make a student a better speaker? Well, a good speaker is usually a good, well-rounded individual. So therein lies a problem. Unfortunately, the best thing I can do during Zoom spaces is just really hope that you're practicing, really hope that you're thinking about the world a little bit differently so that you can approach the topic differently, or really trying to just put yourself out there and experience that anxiety and fight through it, because that will have the potential for you to become a better person down the road. All of those things drastically more important to me than remembering your grade. Or giving you an A or B, a C or a D, or any of the other letters that I could potentially give you that are going to be totally irrelevant after you get your first job anyway, which is another reason why grades are really stupid. But anyway, what I have to also deal with in this world and under this perspective of my problem solution dichotomy is a world of contingency. And what do I do whenever things go wrong? What do I do whenever something happens that requires me to act otherwise? So for instance, if an administrator comes to Aaron and says, hey, Aaron, you generally speaking give way too good grades. We need you to lower some of these grades. What am I going to do in that world? So I've had a lot of internal conversations about what I'm going to do because it's naturally going to happen. And the answer I came up to with is quit. That will be the day I just say, screw y'all, I'm out. And the reason that is going to be the case is because I have a moral kind of bright line, and I accept the risks of what happens, such as maybe losing a home, maybe losing my car, maybe losing a girlfriend or something along those lines, because now I am unemployed, could all potentially be things that happen in that world. But that is my moral justification, or at least a line in which I am taking as a possibility, or at least a certainty. There are infinite amounts of contingencies that can happen with any problem and solution, which is why we try to idealize them through plans of what we will do next whenever they potentially occur. And we try to categorize and at least use our mental output to really worry about them in terms of what is most likely to what is least likely. It is very easy when you are laying in bed at 2 a.m. to think to yourself, what is the lowest possible contingency? Maybe I walk outside and get hit by a comet. Well, if you spend the next 3 hours preparing to get hit by a comet or a bus in your day, that is not an effective use of contingency planning and time. Unfortunately, time is a very finite thing. Our life clock started the second we were born for how long we get to exist. We will run out one day. And so making sure that when we do have those moments where we can just sit and think and do that kind of lofty Greek back to Platonic state of just sitting in a room like, ho, ho, ho. Whenever we have those moments where we can think and make contingency plans, we need to elevate the ones that are most risky and really analyze and have the contingency plans for those the most, and were most likely, not most risky, most likely to occur in that world, so that we can better deal with the unknown or things that potentially occur when they naturally and do occur. And also, we often know to ourselves that uncertainty, kind of that anxiety, the fear of the unknown that happens to us whenever we are about to proceed through action in the future, cannot be debilitating. It's there. It gives us our survival mechanism to say, okay, I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself. But it is also something that will remove you from the chance or the potential to do something great with your lives, or great in your day, whatever the hell that may be, to fix, change, modify, enact yourself upon the world in which you are living. And so, am I making much ado about nothing or having a conversation about everything? Yes, and yes. Uh, what we can see here, or at least we have talked about today in this makeup class of sorts, is that whenever you're going to write your problem, whether it's in this class or a speech class, or whether it's out in the quote unquote real world, whether that exists or not is beyond me. When you have the problems that you are addressing and isolating, I think it's very important that we keep a lot of these kind of lessons, or at least a lot of these thoughts, into the back of our head of just like, how do I step back from the problem and see it with a new set of eyes? Or what am I not directly thinking of that is going to impact the decision making that I am currently doing? And how do I directly come up with some plans for whenever the proverbial shit hits the proverbial fan. What we can do is we can rely on friends, we can rely on others, we can rely on organizational aspects, we can make sure that we are doing as much reading as humanly possible on all the kind of perspectives of the problems and all of the solutions that occur to give ourselves the best kind of chance to succeed when we're going to succeed. And so when you're presenting things in here or other places out there, it is very good for us to always just have that moment. And if there's one thing I want you to remember for this day, is just have that moment where you just hold up, you wait a minute, you step back from whatever it is that is pulling in your perspective and allow yourself to just think for a good 10 to 20 seconds, or even a minute, or even 10 minutes, whatever you have time to do, to then really address the problem that you are going to fix. Because while problems always have this innate kind of demand for action and agency, oftentimes their worst parts or whatever is going to manifest because of the problem isn't happening right away. It just feels like it's happening right away. And so asking yourself what is the direct action to do in this world is going to help you out a lot. Maybe not even in a kind of like professional standpoint, but at least in a very personal standpoint. And so I just wanted to say thank you for having this conversation with me, particularly if you're listening in and have made it to the end. You rock, fight the power. Have a wonderful evening.